Our presenter today is Anya Novicheva, who is a program manager at Microsoft, and she graduated 2 years ago, and she's in the corner of my screen. And her topic is mobile device management. So I think what we'll do is we'll ask her to talk for a while. Feel free to, is it okay if they interrupt you with questions?
Yeah, definitely.
So ask her questions. You can pop questions in the chat. You can also, she'll put her contact info in the chat so you can become contacts with her on LinkedIn. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Anya, it's yours.
Hi, everyone. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen.
Not if I don't let you.
Oh, yes.
There you go. Try now.
Thank you. Let me open my PowerPoint. I don't use Zoom ever. I use Teams. So this is like one of my first or second times using Zoom. Okay. And then all right. Yeah, feel free to interrupt me, ask questions, whatever you guys want. So yeah, I'm a program manager at Microsoft. I work on something called mobile device management. The product name is Microsoft Endpoint Manager. I'll probably refer to it as Intune because it was called Intune for a long time before they rebranded as Microsoft Endpoint Manager, which is just a much longer name. So we call it MEM. But yeah, so some background. I graduated from Bentley in 2018. So like it's almost been 3 years, which is crazy. Feels like I just was in college. And then I majored in computer information systems and I minored in management. I went in thinking I was going to do finance. I took a few accounting and finance courses and I realized that wasn't my thing at all. So I loved IT 101 and I was like, let me keep taking these CS classes. And I'm super glad I did because I feel like with a major in CIS, you can do so many things, so many different things in tech that I know people are doing with majors like this from other schools, from Bentley. So after my sophomore year, I thought that I wanted to do coding. I did a developer internship at an app that did a bunch of like medical stuff, like scheduling your medications for people. And I realized that was not something that I was interested in doing every single day. And I'm really glad that I did this. I highly recommend doing internships in different areas of tech because there's so much you can do and you'll see what you like and what you don't like. No job is going to be perfect, but I realized that coding was definitely not my thing. I also got to do some QA in the same internship. Also wasn't that passionate about it. It was a great opportunity and I'm really glad I did it to see that maybe I want to try something else. So I started doing research at other tech things and this thing kept coming up, program manager or product manager, PM, basically at different companies. It's called different things. And I applied to a few of these. So I applied during my junior year to a program manager internship at Microsoft, and I heard back for a phone interview. And this was around the time you apply to like dozens of internships. I applied to so many, got rejected from so many. You just keep applying and applying, I feel like is the key. Something will definitely stick and it's good to have a few options as well. So I did a phone interview, then I came in for an all day interview process. It was like 5 or 6 hours or something. And I heard back and I started my internship the summer between my junior and my senior year. And during my internship, they paid for my housing. So I lived, the office is in Cambridge. So I lived near Cambridge, went into work every day. And it was really cool that they, comped my housing and I could live basically near Kendall Square. Feel free to ask any questions along the way or at the end, whatever you guys want. So what is a program manager? So I can talk about my experience of almost 3 years, 2.5 years, but I've learned that a program manager is very, very different at different tech companies, but not even just that, like different teams that I work with. Maybe the overarching responsibilities of a PM are similar, but I feel like it's very different day to day for every single team. Even people on my team do different things every single day. You kind of wake up and you don't know what you're going to see in your email, and you have your to-do list and things you want to get done for your features, but every day is different. So some of the main things that I do, one of my main responsibilities is to spec. so write specs for new features. So it's kind of like writing a thesis paper that can be really, really long or really, really short for a feature. And that includes designing what the feature is going to look like, the capabilities of that feature, the requirements for that feature, everything about that feature and how it needs to work perfectly. And then I hand that off to my dev counterpart, the coder that's going to code this feature. And it can be something that takes one sprint, which is 1 month on my team, or something that can take up to a year. I've been on projects that are like a year or longer. And you work with your dev. You talk basically every day or every other day to make sure that everything is going correctly, everything is going smoothly. There's always going to be road bumps. So you talk through those. You know, the design might change. You have to get strings reviewed, what the text is going to be. Basically, you see the feature end to end. And then when it releases, there's always maintenance. Another big role that I take on is maintenance of features that I've released in the past, or my areas of ownership. You know, customers have questions. There's bugs that happen with every release. So got to be on top of that. I also talk to customers, not every day, but some of my days, a large portion, I am talking to customers, trying to figure out what scenarios they need help with, what new features I need to advocate for as a PM so that engineering can fund it because customers are asking for it. We also have a ton of meetings throughout the day. I feel like it's different now with working remote. We're in meetings all of the time, and it's good because we stay connected, and you have to do that because you're remote. But it was way easier when we were in the office. You just like catch someone in the hallway and you talk to them. You just go next door and to someone's office and you talk to them. And we had open space, or we have open space whenever we come back to work. So you just talk to people across the desk. So it's definitely different now, lots of calls. But yeah, every day is different. Like sometimes there will be a critical incident, a live site incident where a customer ran into an issue, and you kind of drop everything and you prioritize that customer's needs, and you figure out what's wrong and you figure out how to fix it. So I work at the New England Research and Development Center. It's in Cambridge, right in Kendall Square. They call it NERD for short. And I put a link to the general careers page and then the NERD website as well. I suggest applying to an internship. And I recommend that this is what they told me, like not to apply to a bunch of different internships at the same company, but to apply to like 1 or 2 roles that you really think would fit you well. So I recommend looking at these links. I can share this deck after and stuff. But yeah, I recommend looking over this. There's a lot of, when you go to engineering, there's so many roles under engineering you might not even think are engineering. So definitely have a look at that. And maybe there's 1 or 2 roles that really stand out to you, and applying to those right online. I think you just need your resume. They don't even need a cover letter, and your LinkedIn link profile. So for my experience, since I had my internship, I've been on the same team, the Intune team or Microsoft Endpoint Manager team. And this breaks out into Apple, Windows, and Android, and I am on the Apple team. And this also breaks out into mobile application management and mobile device management. So mobile application management is when an organization is managing the applications on a device. So say you're working and you have your personal iPhone, but you have Outlook on your phone, PowerPoint, OneDrive, SharePoint, and your organization manages those applications. So if your phone was ever stolen or you lost it, your IT admin can wipe all of the corporate data that is sensitive and anything that they need from those apps on the device, so that nothing company related is at risk if you do ever lose your phone or something, or if it gets stolen. I work on mobile device management, which is a more locked down version of that. So mobile device management is when your IT organization or a school, there's so many different customers, or even like any employee really manages the device as a whole. And this breaks down into personal devices and corporate owned devices. So you can manage a personally owned device. Like for example, my iPhone is managed by Microsoft, and I have a few policies on there that are sent down by Microsoft. But then you can also manage a corporate device. So that fully manages the device. And you guys have seen this all the time, like probably without even realizing, like when you go to a restaurant and you're paying on an iPad, or you're looking at the menu, you're signing your check, whatever, that iPad is fully managed by some kind of enterprise management solution. and it's shut down to just that one app or those few apps that the employees can use. So like they can't go on YouTube or open up, I don't know, the calculator app or settings on the device. It's locked down to just the apps that are needed to complete their role. You see this at hospitals, like nurses have iPads, or yeah, restaurants I feel like is a big one, or in schools. We all probably had like those lockdown PCs at our schools that you can't do specific things on. So for my personal iPhone, if I put the password in wrong 10 times, they actually wipe my phone, because the thinking behind there is that, well, everything is backed up to the cloud, so I won't like lose all my photos and stuff. But if somebody were to steal my phone or something, and try to like open it up and put the password in wrong 10 times, it would be wiped so that no work data would be lost, because I am logged into my Outlook, my email, like all of my stuff on my personal phone. So I wouldn't give my phone to like a kid that might by accident wipe my phone fully. So basically what Intune is it's software for IT admins to configure a bunch of different settings, whichever ones they want, applications, say which apps are required, say which apps are available that you need to do your jobs, permissions. So, for example, like, oh, when you're in this radius of this town, you connect to this Wi Fi because it's your corporate Wi Fi network and you're connected to this VPN. And all of that is configured using mobile device management. You can also do cool stuff like send remote device actions. So, say I have a MacBook and it was stolen, I can call my IT admin and they will remotely lock the MacBook no matter where it is. And when that MacBook is opened, that remote device action will hit the computer and it will be locked. They can remotely wipe it. They can remotely put it in lost mode and find the location of the MacBook or the iPhone. So there's a ton of remote device actions as well. So basically, it's a software for organizations. It's business to business to manage corporate and personal owned devices, so that everything corporate related, all that data is safe and not at risk. I put a link as well for the product. And this is probably something you haven't heard of because it's not like PowerPoint or an Office app or something, because it is sold to enterprises. And it's also included in your M365 license. So a lot of companies will have an IT department that deals specifically with mobile device management, but they don't deal with the other stuff that you probably know of, like, yeah, like PowerPoint, Excel, all that stuff. So in my mind, my team personally breaks up in 3 different teams. So I'm on the Apple team. We work very closely with Apple themselves because we can only support the MDM capabilities on devices that Apple releases. So I can't just come up with a feature that's like, oh, I want to control when the camera is turned on and turned off on these corporate iPhones. I can't do that unless Apple has an MDM payload that we can send down through the MDM channel that will get deployed to devices. So we work closely with the Apple team. We meet with them monthly, to figure out what gaps there are, what customers are asking for, how we can support their OS better, what we need to do. There's sometimes bugs, and we work through with them to figure out what those bugs are. We send logs and are like, oh, is this working the way it should be? Is it not working the way it should be? So I'm on the Apple team, yeah, and I work on a iOS and iPad OS, which is the same from a mobile device management perspective, and then Mac OS as well. So I have some test devices as well. I do some testing in my day-to-day, not as often. That's more of a dev's role, I feel like, but I do a ton of testing of like settings and stuff on my iPad, my MacBook, especially when we release features. It's good to test your stuff so you can write documentation. That's another big thing too, writing documentation for your features so that customers have very clear steps of whatever they're trying to configure in the console. And then there's also the Android team, also based out of Cambridge, and Apple is based out of Cambridge as well. So the Android team, I'm not on the team obviously, so I don't know much about this, but I know they work closely with Google, just like we do with Apple, and they send down Google APIs to the devices and can configure whatever Google allows them to. And for them, it's not really by OS, it's kind of more by the person that makes the devices. So there's Samsung, I don't know much Android devices, honestly, but they work with all of the Android device manufacturers as well. And then there's the Windows team, and they manage the Surface Books, Surface PCs, all of the Surface Pros, the PCs, and that team is the biggest team, I think, and they are in the headquarters, which are in Redmond, which is like a town near Seattle in Washington. So Microsoft Endpoint Manager is made up of Config Manager, which you see here on the left side, and this is more on-prem clients and servers. So you're managing devices, but you have to be on-premise to do this. I don't really work with this as much. And then on the right side, you have Intune, which this is all in the cloud. So the entire Microsoft Endpoint Manager console, it is in the Azure Portal. So people use Azure for a million different things, I feel like, and Microsoft Intune is one of those things that you can do in the Azure portal. So everything is in the cloud. And like I said, I work on Apple products and everything is there. You can see all of your Android devices, Windows, iOS, iPadOS, macOS devices, and it's combined with Config Manager to overall be called Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And there's a ton of cloud scenarios and a ton of on-premise scenarios as well, but I think more and more people are moving to cloud only. And when you're both, I believe we call it hybrid management. So I work on the right side of this just on Apple. I wanted to show some recent features that I've driven end to end as a PM, because I feel like this is the best way to kind of show what my day-to-day looks like. So while I'm speccing a feature and working with the dev, there will be client calls, there will be, bugs that pop up. Every day is different. You kind of never know what you're going to get, like I said, but the overall goal that I'm trying to accomplish every sprint is to make sure that I'm prioritizing the correct features that customers need and customers want, and filling gaps for customers. That's my main goal. So my to-do list is, I got to get these specs done. They have to be correct. I work with designers. Sometimes if I myself can't design it, if it's something more simple, I'll design it myself in PowerPoint with mockups. If I can't do that, I'll work with designers. I work with people that help me with the strings. It's a lot of calls on Teams. It's a lot of communication among a lot of different teams. So this is the Azure portal, and this is specifically Microsoft Endpoint Manager, the admin center in the Azure portal. So on your left here, you can access all of your devices, all of your apps. For example, you want to send apps to your device. These apps are required, like OneDrive. Make these apps available. You can also hide apps, like you want to hide YouTube or something, or Netflix. You can also make it so that your end users can't download those apps from the App Store. You can block stuff, you can allow stuff, push stuff down like apps. Sorry, I don't know if that beeping is, if that's me or if that's someone like asking a question I can't see, but.
It was somebody coming into the room.
Oh, okay. You can manage all of your users. You can see everybody that is enrolled, all of their devices, the OS the devices are running on. Like these devices are on iOS 14.4. These devices are on Mac OS 10.15. There's a ton of reporting stuff. You can monitor all your devices, see which devices are in compliance because they are enrolled with Intune, which devices are not compliant. You can push down settings, apps. There's so much stuff. I personally own an enrollment type called automated device enrollment, which is for corporate devices that are completely locked down and sent to you by Apple. They're corporate devices owned by your organization. You wouldn't use it as like a personal iPhone. And then I also own device configuration, which are all of the settings that you can send to your iPhone. And like I said before, I can't just like make up a setting and put it in this console. It has to be available via an MDM payload by Apple first. And I use Apple's MDM documentation to see what they make available, what comes out new with every release, and then we try to prioritize what's the most important so we can allow admins to configure that in our console. Everything that on your iPhone, like if you go to the settings app, everything you see there can basically be configured by MDM. It just depends how much of it. If it's a personal device, it's not that much. If it's a corporate device, it's basically all of it can be configured. If it's a personal device, it's mostly like you can require a password. So I'm required to have a 6-digit passcode on my personal iPhone because it is enrolled with Intune so that I can open my work email on my phone. So I wanted to show, this is a recent feature that I released. It took about like 8 or 9 months. And it's settings that you deploy to iPhones and iPads. So basically, you go to device features, you have a name for your device configuration profile so you can later go back, look at the reporting, know what people name a very specific thing so they can go back and edit it and know what they're editing it, who they're targeting to, what devices, like iOS devices running everything above 14.2, for example. So this is called home screen layout, and basically there is an Apple MDM payload for corporate iOS and iPadOS devices that allows you to configure the home screen and the dock on your iPhones and iPads. So if you just have your phone and you see all of your apps, you have your folders, you have all of your pages, you have the dock with folders or apps, all of that can be configured by MDM. And what we did here was built kind of like a replica of the outline of an iPad, or it can be seen as an iPhone. And you add the apps that are already in your tenant and you add them over to the home screen or the dock, any apps that you want, web apps, which are just like links that open up a website, store apps from the iOS App Store, system apps, which is like the apps that come with your device when you first get it. You add the apps, and basically it looks like this in the Microsoft Endpoint Manager console, and you know that this is what the device is going to look like. So you can configure as many pages as you want, as many folders as you want, well, within the limitations of what Apple allows. So I think for an iPhone, you can have 4 apps in the dock and up to 6 apps in the dock for an iPad. So you configure this the way you want based on Apple's limitations, and this is what the device is going to look like when you actually deploy it to the device. You'll have all of these apps in those exact positions. And this feature is super helpful for something like, for example, for schools. As a teacher, say you have a bunch of second grade classes, you want to configure the home screen so that everybody's iPad looks the same. So when you say, go to your top right-hand corner and click on your Blackboard app or whatever educational app, everybody is doing the same thing. Nobody's like looking through different folders, has different configurations of the home screen. Everybody knows exactly where to go, and the teachers looks at their iPad and knows that all of the students' iPads look exactly the same. So it just makes it a lot easier. So this is one of the features that recently came out. Schools are loving this, so the feedback's been really good. Sometimes we'll release features that we need to continuously work on because customers maybe don't love it as much as we thought they would initially. So you reiterate on features over time as well. Another cool feature, this is older, but configuring the wallpaper of the lock screen or the home screen on iOS and iPadOS devices. This also has to be a corporate device. So for example, Microsoft can't configure the wallpaper on my personal iPhone because it's my personal phone. But if I had a work phone that was fully locked down, they could configure the wallpaper. And this is especially helpful, I've heard, for example, for nursing stations at a hospital. So a hospital has many, many floors, and there's iPads on every floor, and IT admins will set the lock screen of the iPad a specific color that will say something like nursing station 52, like floor 5. And if the iPad isn't in the place that it needs to be, it's very easy to tell where the iPad's supposed to go. And when you pick up the iPad, like, okay, you know that you're the blue color iPad that says like nursing station 52 or whatever. This is also helpful for schools. Companies can just put their logos on the lock screen or the home screen. You can get creative with this, but I've heard that for hospitals especially, this was a big win for us to support this. So you configure all your stuff. I don't have any more screenshots, but yeah, you configure it all, and then you target the groups that you want, which means the users or the devices that you want this deployed to. And the next time they turn on their phones or open their phones, like past the password, this policy will come down and you will see exactly what you configured in the Microsoft Endpoint Manager console in Azure. You'll see it on the devices, and you'll have a bunch of reporting you can look at too that says, okay, this went down successfully to these phones haven't opened, haven't been unlocked yet, so it's not there yet. This phone maybe isn't a corporate device and you tried to send it to this personal device, so that's going to be a failure in reporting, etc. I wanted to talk about remote work a bit because the first half of my short-lived career so far has been very different than the last year or so. We've been working from home since March, and I personally am really enjoying it, but there are a bunch of pros and cons. The lines get very blurry between work and home when you're home all of the time. So I feel like my hours have definitely increased because I'll just be on my phone and I'll open my Teams app or my Outlook, and I'm, right when I wake up, I'm kind of looking at email and my messages and replying to people, when before I wouldn't do that. I would wake up, like have breakfast, walk to work. I wouldn't even open my laptop until maybe like 10 in the morning. Now it's like 8 a.m. I'm just, opening my phone. So the lines do get blurry between work and home. It's really important, I found, to actually like make those boundaries for myself. Um, but overall, it's actually been really cool to just be home and be able to do my job fully from home. I do miss talking to my team in person. There's a lot more meetings now, and there is some miscommunication sometimes because you're in a meeting, but then you have to set up another meeting, to follow up. Over email, it's harder to kind of sometimes understand what people are talking about. So definitely pros and cons, but I think we'll be remote until the end of the summer. And then they told us that the new normal after COVID is going to be that we can do half of the week in the office and half of the week from home. So I think that would be about 3 days in the office. It has to be a little less than 50% from home. So 2 days from home. So I think that will actually be a really good balance. Maybe if I do Thursdays and Fridays from home. And I highly recommend for school or for work in the future to really invest in your work from home situation or study from home situation, because the first few months when I didn't know COVID was going to be so long, I didn't get a monitor. My desk, like I had a really bad dining room chair that was super cheap. And over the summer, I really like invested. I got a nice ergonomic chair, monitors, all of the right charging cables, everything. And it's made a huge difference. So I highly recommend investing in a good setup for yourself for school, work, whatever it may be, because it makes a huge difference when you're sitting at your laptop like 10 hours a day. Yeah, that's basically all I had. So I can stop sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you also, before I forget, pop your LinkedIn info into the chat so that people who want to become your new best contact can do that?
I will do that.
And let's open up the floor, hey Matt, on and invite any of you to join us for some questions that you might have about, or comments or things you learned that you didn't know about from today's talk about mobile device management and working at Microsoft.
I have a question. So you mentioned that you recommend not applying to just a bunch of different internships to one company, but rather to like focus on a specific like category. How is that for you? Like what categories in specific did you apply to? Did you get several replies to one and you had options, or like how was that for you?
So specifically for Microsoft, because I was applying like for Massachusetts, I didn't want to go to Seattle. There were not that many like options because there's only a few teams in the Microsoft building in Cambridge. I think there's like 400 employees there, but like 100,000 or something, like maybe like 80,000 in Seattle. So I looked at engineering. So I narrowed it down to an engineering role. And then I knew I didn't want to do dev, like coding, because I did that last summer and I didn't like it. And then I saw program manager for a few different products, and I kind of just picked Intune. It was like I was applying to so many internships that I didn't really think about it in too much detail, but I read the descriptions of everything and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. I don't know anything about MDM and I wanted to learn, so I just kind of applied to it. But yeah, I think that's better than just applying to like 10 different jobs at one company, or maybe doing like a few, like some in one city, some in the other, like the headquarters versus smaller towns or cities.
Did they ask you anything about mobile device management when you worked when you interviewed for a job in that field?
That no, they actually didn't. And I did some research
Were you relieved?
before, but yeah, I was definitely relieved because I feel like I did not understand what it was just from going online. Like I did not get what it was. It took me a while after I did my internship to fully understand what the product even is. And I'm still learning a ton, obviously, but the interview was very different for a PM than for a dev. like for a dev, it's just coding questions. For a PM, it was very technical, but combined with a lot of more behavioral questions as well. So even though I prepared a lot for it, it's not like the preparation helped that much for like the behavioral and creative questions, because that was just like, you just have to think of it like on your feet. But prepping for the technical part of it is definitely necessary. But yeah.
I have a
I had a
question.
question as well.
Okay, Tom and then Lucy.
So you were talking about the feature that you implemented and how it took 9 months to get it out there. I was just wondering if you could go into like more detail about the process from like making that idea to like getting it implemented.
Yeah, so it's the process of even getting it prioritized is kind of difficult and takes some time as well, because there's limited resources and there's so much stuff we want to do for customers and there's so many new features. So you have to first get it prioritized and basically be like, okay, these customers need this. These are the scenarios. This is why they need it. And then I have to spec it out, do all of the designs, and then the behavior and what controls will be used, what strings will be used, like the behavior of each, like adding this app or whatever. So then you spec it, you review it with your PM team, you review it with the engineering team, the devs. Then you have to get it prioritized. Sometimes I think for this feature, it got bumped a few times because there were live site incidents, so issues that the engineers working on my feature had to prioritize over this because customers were having issues. So then it just gets bumped out a few months. Then you pick back up, and then it takes a few sprints to code it. You have to test it too. We found some bugs. And yeah, and then it finally releases. And some features are like 1 sprint or 2 sprints if everything goes well, but you just never know because things can pop up and priorities shift, and then you have to like get it prioritized again during planning. So yeah, but the spec is probably the most important part because you have to make sure it's correct, like all the technical aspects of it is correct so that the dev can implement it exactly like you spec'd it.
Yeah, now it's my turn. So I don't quite understand that much about coding and computer science, but I just feel like I have a general question about, like, I understand it's good that you actually get a job, that you actually graduate from the major, and I'm just wondering, like, what does it feel like to work at your major? Like, what's the major difference between a job and life at university, life at studying? Like, if you have to pick, which one is, like, more pressure, like a lot harder for you?
I think work, I know people say school is like harder than work, but for me, I think work is a bit harder. I was like, with school, I knew what to do to get like the grades that I wanted. Obviously, classes were very challenging, but something super important with college is just if you organize everything well and like time manage correctly, you have a to-do list and you can actually get things done. I have a to-do list at work and I never get it fully done. Like, it's just impossible to get every single thing done that I want to get done because there's so much to do. And I work in school, you're with like students and you have professors. I work with so many different teams and everybody's different levels. And then working with customers can be challenging sometimes too. Like, it's super rewarding when everything works out well, but obviously sometimes it doesn't. So working with customers can definitely be challenging when you can't get them what they need in the time that they need. But I really enjoyed college personally. I'm jealous that you guys are still in school. I do enjoy work too, but I think it's a bit more stressful. Like, the deadlines, it's not like a grade. It's like the deadlines, people will be mad if you don't get things done on time. But there's always so many priorities in your head that you have to juggle, and you have to make sure you're on the same page with your manager. So my manager and I meet every week because the priorities will change like every week. I'm like, oh, should I be working on this, then this? And it depends what's the loudest that week, and like sometimes things have to shift. But I'm glad I got a job that's in my major and that I started off like in tech right out of college, because if I ever do want to change, like I'll know what the tech world was like. I have no idea what I want to do like in the future. So far I'm enjoying what I'm doing now, but I have no idea. But I think it's nice that I'm in the tech world right out of college because it gives me a good understanding of if I'm going to want to do it forever or not.
Yep, thank you.
Who else has a question?
Yeah, I have a question. So speaking of tech, I wanted to add. Wait, what was that? Sorry.
I'm not surprised. You always.
So speaking of tech, you were a CS major as well, CIS major, right?
Mhm.
How do you feel like the CIS major? Obviously, Bentley is as a business school strictly, so it's not like an engineering school or anything. How do you feel that the CIS major helped you in your job now? Do you use a lot of things that you learn in class, or not that much, or do you feel like you have to learn a lot more to work for your job?
I think it's good that at Bentley, it is a business school. So the CIS major wasn't just like a computer science degree where every class is coding, because I don't code now. But to be a program manager, or at least at my company, I think you do need like a CIS or CS, some kind of degree, like in engineering. But I think it's good that I took classes like, I don't know, like computer graphics, or we did like how the internet works was a class, I forget what it was called. That stuff helps me now more than like coding classes, although the coding classes helped me in like interviews and stuff for a PM. So I think everything definitely helped at the beginning. Now I work on such a niche product that it's not like, there's definitely concepts that are relevant. Like when I learned about like actually how the internet works and how it was created, stuff like that is actually relevant now. But I work on something so niche that it's not like we learned in class about mobile device management, you know? So I had to, everybody like starts over when they start working, you have to learn everything. And I'm learning all the time. Like I'm still confused at work. Like often you have to talk to people. It's such a big product. You have to talk to people all the time. Like you're always learning. But I definitely think it was good that all my classes weren't just coding. Because if they were, I think I'd have a gap in knowledge of technology as a whole, if that makes sense, rather than just like knowing, like doing coding classes.
Yep. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Madhouse. Anybody else have a comment?
Did you always know that you wanted to major in CIS, or were you kind of undecided when you came to Bentley?
I was undecided. I thought I wanted to do finance and accounting or something like that. And then I did GB 212, or I don't even remember what it was called at this point, but I did not, I struggled.
Yeah, I'm in that now.
Yeah, I struggled so hard. Like I was in tutoring every day. I did not, like I enjoyed finance. I was just not good at finance or accounting. I was like, this is not for me. Not that things come, like CS does not come easy to me either. I put a bunch of effort in, but I was actually interested in my classes, and like I was able to do well when I worked hard. I did not do well in my accounting courses, but it's cool because I only decided I wanted to be a CS major my end of sophomore year. So I had 2 years to try finance, accounting, marketing, management. I did IT 101. Like I tried everything. I think it's really cool that Bentley lets you guys do that, because then you can try everything out. And end of sophomore year, I declared CIS as my major, and then I had plenty of time the rest of the time to fulfill all my requirements.
Most useful courses you took? Looking
What do you
back?
say?
Most useful courses that you took looking back?
I think the most useful course I took was, I forget the professor's name, but the one where we did like networking and like learned about like internet connections and Wi-Fi and
Yes, 240?
yes, 240. And I did not even do well in that class. Like I struggled in that class, but that class was super interesting. I really enjoyed it. And then I also really enjoyed, there was like a mathematics class that was computer graphics. That was a really interesting class. I also don't remember what it was called. I think it was a math class, but it was for my CS degree.
Professor Carter, I think, taught that.
Yeah, I think so.
And was it Yates who you had for the other one?
No, I had Professor Yates for other CS courses, but not for 240. 240 was a different professor.
Okay.
He had a book. I think he wrote a book.
Oh, Professor Englander?
Yes.
Oh, he retired.
Okay.
So you were lucky to get him while you could.
Yeah, that class was hard, but it was so interesting. And then I took Python with you. That was super helpful because that was actually part of my interview and other interviews that I did for a bunch of other companies. And then I did Java too, which was helpful as well. Honestly don't remember a lot of that stuff now, but it's definitely something I'd probably have to look at again if I were to like interview for somewhere else. I think I'd have to refresh my mind a lot on all that stuff because I do work on such a niche product.
How easy or difficult is it to move within Microsoft should you come to a point where you think that it's time for you in your career to do something else?
They actually make it super easy. I've had friends on my team that have moved to other teams, either because they wanted to be in Seattle or California. Managers are super transparent with that. Like they're always telling us, like, talk to your manager if you want to switch teams. Your manager will rate your recommendation and help you, and then you have to interview for the new teams. So you have to do the whole interview process. But managers are super supportive. I feel like at the 3, 4, 5 year mark, people are moving around teams. That's very common, and it's not looked down upon at all. It's actually very like recommended that you try something new at like the 4 or 5 year mark. I don't have any plans for that right now. Like I'm still at 2.5, 3 years. I feel like I still have so much more to learn, but people move around all the time.
I have a question. So you mentioned earlier, like how you always learn new things, and mostly at your work, the things you learn are new, totally new for you. Like, so I was wondering, like, approximately how much you learn at work is like new to you, and what are those topics that you feel like you have to learn? Like, yeah.
I feel like since I've started, everything has been new. Like I had no idea what MDM was or Intune or any of that. I have had to learn like about iOS, iPad OS, Mac OS, like the actual infrastructure of the OS. Didn't know anything about that. Like I had an iPhone growing up and stuff, but I didn't know exactly like how it actually works. I feel like because as Apple releases stuff, we have to support it. So I'm always learning like what are these new features that they're releasing that we have to support. So it's always something new. Obviously, stuff sticks with me, like, and I testing devices. Like I know these devices in and out at this point because I've been testing with them for over 2 years. But there will always be new stuff on Macs and iPhones and iPads that I have to learn about, because then when I'm talking to customers, I have to like know what I'm talking about, obviously, and exactly how the features work. Yeah, like there's new versions of Xcode every release or every year or something. So then I know the devs have to like pour all of their code over onto the new Xcode versions, and they have to also like learn about that and stuff. Seems like everyone's learning all the time, even if the main themes of things stick with you.
Mhm.
How many cell phones do you have?
I just have for me, like I have my personal phone, but I have a bunch of test devices. So I have like a big iPad, I have a MacBook, I have my Surface Book, I have like small iPhones, and like yeah, maybe like 4 test devices.
Thank you. Anybody else have a last question or two before we stop? Anya, are there any questions that you want to ask them?
I don't think I had any. I was gonna ask how you guys, I didn't realize Bentley was open and that like people are on campus. I thought it was closed for some reason.
We're off right now. Who's on campus right now?
Cool.
So some people are on campus and some classes are hybrid and some classes are online.
So does anyone, you guys are in your dorms, but you can go to class if you want, or you have to like be in your dorms?
I mean, we're free to do, I mean, not whatever we want, but we have class. There's like certain restrictions. You use our app, like the what's it called? I forgot the name of the app. Grubhub to order food, and so we go to Seasons, and then we order food, and we go there. We just grab like the food, then we come back to our rooms and we eat it here. So
That's so interesting.
So I have one last question
And then-
for some of you guys, and that is, what's one thing about mobile device management that Anya spoke about that you didn't know about until you heard her talk about it?
Well, I thought it was very interesting how you mentioned you have to write like basically like a thesis for every feature. I didn't realize there was so much writing that goes into like the preparation. Like I knew obviously it would be like coding and stuff, but I didn't know it was like written explanations and stuff like that. I found that very interesting.
Cool, thank you.
I feel like I kind of like know, like have an idea about what you're talking about, like overall. Like you talk about how the features are being, controlled by the companies and so on, so on. Like, cause I go to a lot of, technology stores, and I saw those managers holding an iPad, and I kind of like understand what they're doing, but like all those, how those specific details, how they work, like how they're supported by the Microsoft, I feel like that's totally new for me because I didn't know that the Microsoft can do so much things. Yeah.
I think people usually like to compare Apple and Microsoft as like big rivals, and they wouldn't see them working together. But after the new CEO, kind of Microsoft became this like platform instead of just company that rivals Apple. So I think that's something that's not that common to hear is like you working with Apple. That's another company. You keeping up with their new features and everything. I found that to be interesting.
Thanks. Anyone else? Okay. So I will close by pointing out that next week we have Yuha Mu and Carmen Cardenas coming. Yuha works at Markham. He used to work at Google. He's a graduate student who got his MSIT at Bentley. And I think he graduated, I'll have to ask him, 6 or 7 years ago. And Carmen graduated about 3 years ago and is now working for a company called Rootstrap. And they'll be in next week to give next week's presentations. I want to give a shout out to Sarah Donlin. Sarah, are you on here still?
Yeah, I'm here.
Sarah has made all these wonderful graphics that we've been using for this Topics in Tech series. So thank you for doing those. If you follow the Sandbox on Instagram, you'll see them first because we're posting those there as well, and on our Facebook page and I think on Twitter. So and these presentations will be recorded or are being recorded, as you know, and should be up on the Sandbox website, cissandbox.com within a few days. So please join me in thanking Anya. Grab her contact info from the chat so you can reach out to her again. And hopefully we'll see many of you again back here next week or for another one of these series. Thanks, everybody.